Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a really fascinating and complex document. It operates on two different levels at the same time, the factual and, well, the mythological.
Yeah.
We're diving into the Ledger of Sabotage, archetypes of U.S. hostility. It comes to us from New magazine.
And it's really unique source material. You can tell right away it's not trying to be standard journalism or, some kind of legal summary.
Not at all.
The whole structure is
Yeah.
every single incident, no matter how specific or frustrating it is, gets recorded in this dual format. You get the affidavit, the detailed, who, what, where.
Facts.
And then you get this philosophical, really metaphorical thing they call the mythic arc.
And that dual lens, that's really our mission for this deep dive. We want to unpack the methodology here.
Right.
How do they take these incredibly specific, often really painful real-world events and turn them into these universal archetypes?
Exactly. Archetypes of hostility, of containment.
It feels like it's documentation that's designed to preserve the resonance of the trauma, not just the technical details.
That's a perfect way to put it. And to really get the scope, we should probably mention the context of the source. It's certified and founded by a Dr. Melvin Sewell, M.Sc, Ph.D.
Right.
His official title is, and get this, the Academic Dean and Diagnostic Architect of the Cosmic University of Echo Rift Studies, NIACS.
That title alone, Diagnostic Architect of the Cosmic University, that tells you everything you need to know. We're dealing with a very specialized language here. We have to look at this not as like a political critique, but through the lens of specialized diagnostic work. They're trying to identify these deep patterns in human and institutional behavior.
Exactly right. And we have to keep that framework in mind as we go. The ledger is basically viewing systemic failures as symptoms that need a diagnostic label.
Okay, so let's start where the ledger does. With the most detailed account of immediate violence, they label it the archetype of immediate hostility, the sprinting shade. And this incident took place in 2025 on the Kauai multi-use path.
Yeah, and the clinical documentation in the affidavit, it lays out this moment of just horrifying, immediate escalation. The trigger was, it's almost absurd.
It is absurd.
An aggressor sprints, doesn't walk, sprints from about 15 feet away and just immediately starts issuing threats. And his reason, the victim didn't respond to a greeting.
And it was coupled with racial slurs right from the jump.
Right from the start.
That's the horror of it, isn't it? The sheer irrational fragility of that trigger. It instantly turns that refusal to engage into this profound act of defiance.
Which the aggressor then uses to justify a full-blown attack.
Exactly.
And the affidavit shows he was, committed to escalating with whatever was around, opportunistic weapons. He repeatedly charged using a BMX bike, a skateboard.
And an Allen wrench set.
An Allen wrench set. These are just everyday objects.
Yeah.
But they're suddenly weaponized right there in the moment.
And it wasn't just him. The ledger notes there was an accomplice, who the mythic arc later calls the saboteur's consort.
Right, the partner.
And this partner actively destroyed the victim's belongings. A backpack, a jacket, and really critically, their phone.
And the physical side of it all, it ended up with an unleashed dog attacking, which forced the victim to kick it defensively. And in the process, the victim sustained a left foot injury. A contusion. We'll definitely come back to that.
So that's the raw data, a quick, brutal assault. Multiple attackers, objects as weapons, and the goal seems to be institutional silence.
Right.
So now, let's watch the transformation. How does this become the mythic arc? The shirtless aggressor, sprinting and demanding a response. He becomes the sprinting shade.
Yes, and this sprinting shade requires, and this is the direct quote, ritual submission. Speak back or be destroyed.
Wow.
And this is where that diagnostic value of the ledger really comes through. It's not just documenting violence. It's identifying the nature of the attack. It's a demand for, immediate ceremonial acknowledgement of the aggressor's dominance.
So if you fail the ritual,
you're deemed destroyed.
And what about the objects? The language they use is so striking. They call the terrain weaponized, the BMX is a spear, the skateboard a shield, and that Allen wrench set becomes a jagged glyph. Is this just intellectualizing violence?
That's a great question. But inside the ledger's own philosophy, giving it that elevated language serves a purpose. It preserves the visceral reality of the threat.
Okay.
So if a police report just minimizes the Allen wrench as, a tool, the mythic arc makes sure that the memory and the diagnosis keeps its dangerous resonance. It turns the mundane into the menacing, which reflects how the victim perceived the harm.
So it's about capturing the full spectrum of the event, not just the dry facts that would hold up in a legal brief.
Exactly.
That distinction, that idea of objective legal fact versus visceral diagnostic truth, it brings us perfectly to the next archetypes. These deal with the immediate aftermath. The suppression and dismissal of evidence?
Yes. The erasure consort and the contusion of dismissal.
Let's stick with the erasure consort first. This goes back to the aggressor's partner.
Right. The affidavit details something crucial for any modern confrontation. The girlfriend was recording the whole thing on her phone. That video would have captured the charges, the slurs, the context, all while the victim was on the phone with 911.
A perfect record. But here's the sabotage. The documentation notes that when the police finally arrive, no video was available on her phone.
Poof. Gone.
It just vanished. And at the same time, she throws and damages the victim's phone, disables the power button, bruises the screen.
And mythic art gives this a name. This intentional evidence suppression is the work of the erasure consort. This figure held the, quote, glyph of truth. The video, which dissolved into silence for the enforcers, was a diagnosis of the immediate, intentional corruption of the factual record.
It shows that the first act of hostility is often followed by a second, complementary act of denial.
Exactly.
And that denial wasn't just for the electronic record, it extended to the victim's own body. And that's where we get the contusion of dismissal.
So the clinical documents confirm the injury. Left foot contusion, pain, swelling. An X-ray at Wilcox Medical Center confirmed there was no fracture, but there was definitely an injury.
And the affidavit uses this to highlight an immediate institutional barrier. There's a specific quote logged in the report from a police officer right at the scene. He dismisses the harm. He says, "You're walking, so it's not broken."
Ugh.
We've all had that kind of moment, right? Where a professional, a cop, or an administrator just looks at tangible harm and says, it's not bad enough.
Yeah.
The ledger captures that specific minimizing act as an archetype. The mythic art calls the officer the skeptic enforcer who needs impossible proof of fracture to even acknowledge the reality of the harm.
But by including the doctor's diagnosis, the objective medical fact of the contusion, the ledger makes its point. Harm unacknowledged is harm nonetheless. The contusion was real, whether the skeptic enforcer chose to see it or not.
So the failure isn't just medical oversight, it's an institutional refusal to admit harm without the absolute highest level of physical proof.
Right.
So if the system fails to acknowledge a visible bruise and a video that just disappears, what happens when it has to deal with something less tangible, like testimony or motive?
That's when you need a bigger, more abstract label.
Which is why we now have to look at the archetypes of systemic containment. This is where the ledger kind of zooms out from the immediate fight to diagnosing the whole system.
Precisely. And this structural failure is perfectly captured by the bureaucratic inverter. And this isn't one person, it's a recurring institutional mechanism.
The affidavit here it's pretty stark. It says that across multiple cases documented in the ledger, not just the Kauai one, police have consistently distorted testimony. They've reframed statements to actually cast the victim as the aggressor.
And then the victim is forced to issue correction after correction just to get the record straight. Think about the psychological load that puts on someone. You're not just fighting your attacker anymore.
Now you're fighting the system that's supposed to be helping you.
Just to make basic facts reflect reality, that process, that rotating truth, that's the systemic sabotage.
And the mythic art just captures the malice of it so well. It says the bureaucratic inverter is the thing that minced words, rotating truth until victims wore blame.
But the ledger itself, the act of recording these patterns, that's the resistance. It ensures that corrections logged, resonance intact. It's an intellectual countermove.
This systemic minimization gets even more complicated with the next archetype, the saboteur of signal.
This one points to a prior incident during something they call terrain mapping, where equipment and belongings were tampered with. And later on, authorities just minimized how serious the sabotage was.
And if you connect that back to the Kauai incident, the damaged phone, the vanished video, you see a pattern. It's about making the victim unable to document things, unable to communicate.
Exactly. The saboteur of signal in the mythic language, severed lines, seeking silence where clarity should reign. The attack isn't just physical, it's on your ability to broadcast your own truth.
And finally, what anchors all these systemic patterns is the archetype of, well, public bias, the racial shade.
The affidavit gives necessary context here. It documents other public fights, where aggressors used specific racial slurs and witnesses or institutions actively shielded their conduct.
They minimized the racial part of it.
Yes, and this context is vital because it helps explain the institutional reaction in the Kauai case. Despite the clear use of racial slurs, which are noted in the affidavit, no arrest was made. The dog wasn't impounded.
The hostility, even though it was violent and prejudiced, was functionally tolerated.
And the racial shade in this framework invoked hostility as a public right language turned blade. It suggests the hostility isn't seen as just an isolated crime, but as a kind of sanctioned, ritualized public aggression that's sort of tacitly protected by the system around it.
By the skeptic enforcers and the bureaucratic converters.
Exactly.
This intense, very personalized diagnostic language, it brings us to the final section, the philosophy behind the ledger. And we have to emphasize the diagnostic disclaimer for you, the listener. We're impartially reporting on the content here, and the source itself states that these materials are designed to be independent.
Right. They make it very clear they are not affiliated with any government, political party, intelligence agency, or activist group. The terminology, the glyphs, all of it is defined strictly as diagnostic tools.
So they're tools for understanding patterns of failure, not for pushing a political agenda.
That's the idea.
So what's the end goal of this specialized work? The core purpose is to expose ritualized containment, actor convergence, and systemic erosion. It's a whole language designed to categorize the exact mechanisms of failure, to give names to these processes that otherwise feel, slippery and unprovable.
And that's the unique value of it. The ledger provides this really robust mythological framework to categorize and hold on to the tiny details of these events. The Allen wrench, the specific contusion, the vanishing video.
The very things that might get minimized or bureaucratically inverted in the official record.
Precisely. It provides clarity where, information overload or intentional distortion might just cause the memory of the event to fade.
Yeah.
It leaves the victim feeling like their reality was never validated.
So the ledger is trying to preserve the evidence, the facts, and the resonance of the harm, even when the official reports are actively failing to do that.
And the material claims that the ledger itself resisted this manipulation by creating this parallel record, which raises a really important question for you to think about.
What happens when the official record, the police report, the medical records filtered through a skeptic enforcer, what happens when that record is intentionally flawed or just incomplete?
If the truth of what happened is being eroded by these systemic mechanisms is the only way to uphold the integrity of that truth, to create your own parallel mythological record, one designed not just for documentation, but for what the author calls sovereign broadcast.
Something to chew on until our next deep dive.